Okay, well, we'll get started. My name is Russ Danner, and I'm the Vice President of Products with Crafter Software. And this talk is really the modern web. Crafter Software is a company that provides and builds and provides software for digital experience management and delivery. And all of our software is GPL. It's open source software. It's available on GitHub. It's all built on top of Alfresco. We provide a commercial license for that software. Our business model is very, very similar to Alfresco's. We make our money selling support. Our platform has been in production for over 5 years. We're running hundreds of major brands and other digital experiences with the platform. We have a very strong partner ecosystem. Many of our partners are Alfresco's top platinum partners. So if you visit out here, you're gonna find a lot of the best partners out there are also Crafter partners. And the other thing to note here is that this solution, I know you heard a little bit about web experience management this morning in the keynote, but this solution is the only natively integrated web experience management platform with Alfresco. So this is just a few of our customers here. You can see it's we've got some good brands here. It's a very battle-tested platform, and what I really want to talk about is the customer experience freight train. I think this is a little bit more interesting title. If that's a little too abstract, maybe we should call this talk "Things Are Changing Fast. You Need to Get Moving. Here's Why and What to Do About It" with Crafter CMS and Alfresco. So the way that I'm going to approach the talk is to really talk about where we are, where things are going, and what steps we can take next. So the first thing to understand is there's some really fundamental shifts going on the internet today, and these shifts are driven by three major trends. And the first trend is social. So the web is much, much more social today than ever before, and much less anonymous. I mean, think back to 2000 and the idea of having all that information on Facebook or in LinkedIn, and with your real name, not a pseudonym. Today's web is all about sharing and connecting with others. As our own identities. Another big trend is local, or what some people call personalized content and services to your location. So while the internet is making the world a much smaller place, today's technology is really making our local experience much bigger by delivering content and data and services that are relevant to where we are, so we can find out what's going on around us with our devices. And of course, the biggest trend here is mobile. Mobile use is just simply exploding. It's really off the charts, and Gartner really predicts that by the end of 2014, for most sites, more people will consume your experiences through some kind of mobile device than will through a traditional desktop. So I think that's a big wake-up call for a lot of folks. And these trends are really reinforcing each other. Really what makes this engine, or this change so, what's driving the speed of this change is the fact that there's a sort of a positive feedback loop between the three of these things. So, social really drives mobile, and mobile drives local, and so on and so on. And it's kind of a very virtuous positive feedback loop. And of course, all of this is enabled by ubiquitous network, so we can get online almost wherever we are, either through some sort of 3G or 4G connection or wireless connection. And of course, another thing enabling this is Moore's Law, and John Newton talked a lot about that in his keynote. So as a result, things are getting a lot smaller, a lot faster, and a lot more powerful, and of course, a lot cheaper. And this is just one trend. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about trends. I think since we're all mostly in the technology space here, we all know this, but this exponential curve that you see with technology is causing that same curve, either very strict, very steep arithmetic curves or other exponential curves, to happen elsewhere in the world. And here you can see a very steep arithmetic curve where the world population is at 7.1 billion people, and there's 6.8 billion mobile devices in the world. Now, that's not evenly distributed, of course. Not everybody in the world has a mobile device, but And so many people do have multiple devices in more fortunate countries. But if you listen to Jimmy Wales' keynote, he mentions how fast and how alarming it, or not necessarily alarming, but how amazing it is that a lot of these less fortunate countries are adopting smartphones at a very fast rate, much more than you would think. And again, it's because these things are becoming very, very affordable, and because the network's there to make them useful. So this is really driving and creating a demand for a new kind of digital experience. And that's because there's more ways than ever before to interact with businesses. So in the past, you just had a physical store, and then the internet came about in the 2000s, and we had an online capability, and those experiences were very disjointed. It was just kind of two completely different experiences. But today, we have all kinds of other ways to interact with our businesses, and the experience is coming closer and closer together and becoming more consistent across all touch points. And customers really identify and appreciate when they interact with your brand if it's consistent across every touch point. They don't want to have, if they use your website, they get one experience and it's a good experience, and then they go on site and you don't know that they've had an interaction in the past or they have a bad experience with you. That's going to reflect poorly on your brand, so you want to really try to make it very consistent across all touch points. And one way to do that is to optimize for the channel. So here you can see, this is JetBlue's website. They've got the traditional website in the back where you've got a lot of real estate, and as a result you've got some very important things on the left-hand side to sort of book a flight. That's get the business and the primary intent out of the way. But on the right you've got a lot of marketing collateral. And what's interesting is JetBlue gets that when you're using this smartphone, the whole mode, the whole context of how you're interacting is 100% different. And here, when you're on a traditional desktop, you're probably just in a more relaxed setting. You have time to browse and consume content. When you're on your mobile device, you're probably on the go. You need something actionable. You're interested in doing things like checking in for a flight, checking on the status of a flight, and so on. So you really want to have that experience optimized specifically for the channel and the context in which people use those channels. Another is, that customers expect us to take advantage of the unique capabilities of these devices. They're more than aware that they're there because so many companies do take advantage of them. But a lot of these devices have all kinds of unique capabilities, from GPSs to voice recognition, accelerometers, gestures and things that make things feel much more, makes you feel much more connected and have sort of an emotional impact with the experience and so on. So again, I don't want to belabor this point, but this experience freight train is really coming, and you can see it in the mobile space now. But if you really look around, there's some other places that you'll recognize it. A lot of companies are still in denial about this, but there are some companies that are sort of answering the call, and usually it's because mobile is really shifting this year. This is sort of the first place that they get on board with it. So taking for example, their traditional web experience and turning that to a mobile experience is the first step. But you also see rich content and connectivity in physical commercial spaces. This is one of our customers. It's a large hospitality organization, and in their lobby they have very rich media, the ability to sort of see what's going on around the neighborhood and the city that you're in, get weather and information, and this is just a really good experience for their customers. Another thing that we see is mobile-enabled workforces, and I think Apple's a really good example of what can be done here. When customers come into your store, they've already been on the internet. They already know everything there is to know about your product. They don't need you to tell them what's going on with the product. What they want from you is help knowing, when can the model that I want be here? can you get me signed up for a Genius Bar appointment? Can you help me get checked out? Another way that it's changing the experience is that everybody in the store, for example, in Apple, carries the ability to check you out. So there's no line in the store. In fact, the only line at the Apple Store is the line, outside waiting to get in. Right? So I think that's an important change, something people should pay attention to. Okay, so there's a real convergence of the physical and digital experience going on. And this has been going on for a long time. It's happening very slowly, but if you pay attention, it's been around us for a long while. So here, this is a football game. If you watch it on TV, you've got all kinds of markup on the field. You can't see it here on the slide, but you got your first down line. You know which direction the ball's going. You know which down it is, and so on. And I think there's a whole maybe generation of people who maybe can't even watch a football game without this. So there's sort of an augmented reality there. And of course, all of this is leveraging systems in the back end, like our CRM systems, like our ERP systems, and so on, to help us understand how customers have interacted with us in the past and help us create that consistent experience, which is, again, this sort of picture of this customer journey here, and trying to understand that customer's journey and where all their touch points are, and what that experience should be like, and how the data is flowing through the journey. So this is an example of taking advantage of all this integration and just really showing how you can sort of augment a physical experience with a digital experience where, because you have GPS on the phone and you know where the customer is, and because you know what maybe they've bought in the past, you can really tell them, hey, there's something here that, there's a coupon here that you should, a deal that you should take advantage of, and so on. But the example's a little impractical. I mean, nobody's going to walk around a store like this. But these applications do exist today, but they're silly. But if you're paying attention, you do see that the wearable technology is really, coming into its own now. So there are things like Google Glass and Jawbone and other wearable devices that are collecting data or augmenting our existing experience with digital content wherever we go. Now, I agree with John Newton. Google Glass, for example, is a little bit geeky, and I don't think many people are going to walk around with this big thing on their face. But we know that Moore's Law is going to drive these things to be much smaller and much less invasive and intrusive, and make them much more practical so that we can take advantage of them. And we're only at the beginning of this curve. It's going to accelerate. That's the nature of these curves. That was sort of the point of showing you some of those graphs earlier. So we are sort of at an inflection point, and you can expect that things are only going to start changing faster, and tomorrow's not really going to look like yesterday. Now, as all this change happens, content really still will remain at the center, right? Content is the core of our business. It is the core of our message. And that's going to continue to be king forever. And so we will still need traditional CMS technology. Okay, that capability is not going to go away, but we do need something more. We need more capability, and that's because the number of touch points is growing, and as the number of touch points grow, we need to be able to adapt quickly. You need to pay attention to the number of touch points that as they come out, and see which ones represent an opportunity for you, because when you identify that, the first movers for those opportunities usually get the biggest bang for their buck. So that's important. And it won't be long before opportunity turns to mandates, and we see that in the mobile space, right? It's now becoming a mandate that you have some kind of responsive or adaptive and responsive kind of design on your site. So that you can engage a customer in their terms, for example, in their, for their location, in their language, for their device, what mode are they in? Are they working or playing? And really targeted and specifically for them, because there's so many people vying for your attention on the internet that if you're not speaking directly to the customer, then somebody else is going to get their attention. Okay. So another key thing here is, and we were just sort of talking about this before before this session kicked off, which is that when customers come into our stores, or either online or offline, they already know a lot about the product. They're already well informed, so they're really looking to have a conversation with us. And if we're not willing to engage with them, then they're going to have that conversation without us. So it's really important that we help facilitate a conversation. And I think there's a really good book called the Clue Train Manifesto that really talks about this phenomena. And these conversations really help build customer loyalty. So you can see here, people really move. They kind of progress from strangers to friends to listeners to customers and so on, all the way to fans. And fans, just to tout the Apple example, fans really drive business, right? Apple's the biggest business in the world, so you really want to engage your customers and build customer loyalty, because customer loyalty absolutely drives bottom line results. So the pressure and workload for all of this is mounting, and we're not really hiring to fill this gap. As more channels come online, all of our authors, all the people managing this content, they have more work to do, and we're not hiring to fill that gap. In fact, we've cut back a bit, and so there's just more and more work for the same group of people to do. And it turns out that the tools that we have today, a lot of people still have legacy CMSs and so on. They just really can't handle it. But that leads to a lot of frustration. But there is a solution, and that solution is Crafter CMS and Alfresco. Right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So what I'm going to talk about is some keys to success in this new space, and how Crafter addresses those. And then I'm going to jump in and give a demo. So the first key would be engagement, and we already talked about what that means. You sort of look around this wheel here, you can see all these sort of different ways to engage your customers. And one of those key capabilities is to be conversational and social. And so Crafter CMS has a social platform we call Crafter Social that allows us to attach comments and ratings and other social interactions to almost anything in your digital experience. Another thing is to provide targeted and personalized content, right? We talked about how people are online more than ever before, but they're online in shorter bursts. They have a lot of people coming to them, a lot of people vying for their attention, so we need to speak directly to them with information and content that's immediately relevant. And to do that, we need to use targeting and personalization, and Crafter provides both the ability to create those experiences and test them and deploy them. Another thing would be to be able to really measure that engagement. So you want to know how well you're doing. You want to know if it's effective so that you can change. And so you need to make sure that we make sure that our platform provides the tools to do that. Another key is multi-channel, right? So more channels come online every day, and we need a platform that can scale with the number of channels coming online. And so as part of that, we need to be able to create, edit, and manage the experiences for each channel. So you can see here, and we'll see this in the demo, you can have, a traditional desktop experience and a mobile experience, and you're able to quickly create and test those experiences in the platform. Another capability is to, as part of multi-channel, is the ability to push that experience out. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. Another key for this era of engagement is the ease of integration. I think the keynote this morning touched on that a lot. People already have a CRM system, a marketing automation system, an ERP system, analytics system, and so on. And they really want to continue to use those systems. They've been effective for them in the past. They provide the most rich functionality, and so we really need a platform that can integrate with those existing systems. And with Crafter, because we're based on Java, because of our architecture, we're well positioned to do that. And this is very similar to this morning's note, but really I think there's a lot of systems out there that basically say we're an all-in-one solution, that you can get all that you need out of a box. And we really think that you can't buy competitive advantage in a box. You've got to craft it. Those all-in-one solutions are a lot like the Swiss Army knife that we see up here. I hope there's nobody from Swiss Army here. But basically, the way that you can look at that is that's a company that says they do everything. They do CRM, they do marketing automation, they do web experience management. Well, if they're doing everything, they have no focus. They can't do everything very well. And so what you end up with is all your boxes checked, and you have all the quote-unquote tools, but none of the tools are very good at what they do. So, and as part of ease of integration, I think one of the big aspects of Crafter that makes it very easy to integrate is that we have what we call a decoupled architecture. That means that you have your authoring environment completely separate from your delivery channels, okay? So over here on the left-hand side, you can see that you've got Alfresco. That's where all your content is stored and managed. On top of that, you have Crafter Studio. So your authors are actually logging into Crafter Studio, which is a plugin to share, and they're using tools which behind the scenes are managing content in Alfresco for them. And then when content is ready, it's been through the publishing, the review process, it's then published to one or more channels on the right-hand side. And so you can see that a decoupled architecture immediately sets you up for multi-channel, right? It's not a single database. Because you're publishing, you can immediately push to different channels. It's much more scalable because you don't have, necessarily necessarily the same technology on either side. You've got a better chance of meeting your SLAs. On the right-hand side, your systems of engagement with your customers, maybe they need to be up, 5, 6 nines. But on the authoring side, it has a completely different SLA. By separating decoupling the system, you can support that. Also, I think another key is permissions, right? In your authoring environment, you've got people logging in from your corporate, your corporate identity system, okay? And on the delivery side, you've got customers, and you don't want to mix those groups together. So by decoupling, you can manage that. And of course, another key aspect there is by decoupling the systems, you're separating the code bases, and by separating the code bases, you've got less complex code, and that makes it easier to integrate as well. A sort of separation of concerns. Another key thing here is that you've got, with Crafter and Alfresco, you've got a single repository. And I think this is really unique in the space. Now, there are other CMS vendors out there that can say, well, we can do document management, web content management, and records management. We can do all that. But the reality is that their solution is a result of a lot of acquisitions. I mean, almost anybody out there making the same claim, if you dig into what they've got a bunch of different technologies, bunch of different platforms that all have been acquired and stitched together. With Alfresco, you have one consistent platform based on modern technology like Spring and Ibetus and whatnot, and it all works together. So you can actually have cases managed in Workdesk and flow those out to different channels on the web, right? I mean, it's obvious that if you say you're managing some police cases, that some portion of those cases should be made public. So it's very easy to get those out onto different channels. The same is true for documents, right? Alfresco can pretend to be your SharePoint server. It can pretend to be your email server, your shared drive. You can have groups managing documents, and when those documents reach a final state, they can then be published to different channels via Crafter CMS. And of course, obviously your Crafter CMS can handle all of your web and other digital content as well. Okay, another thing for ease of integration is to be built on top of consistent modern technology, and that we're really very proud of our technology. Of course, we're built on top of Alfresco. We also build on top of Solar. We use Solar Alfresco uses Solar under its index, and so do we. And our Solar implementation is much more what we would call standard. We use Spring MVC for our products and FreeMarker, which makes it very easy to template. And you can choose any front-end frameworks that you want, so it's very developer-friendly as well. Another key to success here is ease of use, right? So because we have so much work to do as authors now, we have so many channels to handle, the platform absolutely must be easy to use. So we must provide things like in-context preview so that we can see what we're working on before we publish it. It needs to have very powerful in-context editing, so so that I can what I see is what I get, and it's the tools are simple. This is just sort of another easy and sort of powerful editing capability here, which is drag and drop page construction. You want to be able to let content specialists and your authors use tools that they're familiar with. So instead of giving them kind of a web tool, a mediocre web tool to manage images, let them use Photoshop, let them use Dreamweaver, let them continue to use tools that make them as effective as they possibly can be, and at the same time improve the whole workflow so that they're working right in context with the CMS, that their changes are audited and they're versioned and so on. So this sort of brings us to another key here, which is developer friendly. So again, because we're going to be doing a lot of integration, we need to be developer friendly. And that's going to rely, in order to be developer friendly, we want to be working with the most modern technology. And we want to be extensible. And we've done a lot of work to make sure that this platform is extensible, so that if you find something that, you find a new channel that you need to add, that's easy. If you need to add a new authoring capability, that's easy. If you need to add new functionality to your website, that's easy. We've spent a lot of time on making this not just a product, but a platform. Also, you need to be high performance, right? The more channels you have, the more work your systems are doing. And also, performance really very directly relates to bottom line revenue. I think you can, like a single second in page load time can be sometimes a 7% drop in revenue. Crafter CMS has extreme performance. We don't actually use a database. We use Apache Solr for dynamic search, and we serve our content off of disk and out of memory. And as a result, a single node of our delivery system, which is called Crafter Engine, can do 1 million page views, dynamic page views an hour. That's pretty incredible. And this is what this slide is about, basically. We don't use a database, just memory, disk, and Solr, and the whole platform's horizontally scalable. And the final key to success in this space is to be open. And there's several aspects of open. And the first is open content, right? So we talked about how content is still king, it's still the heart of your business. And along with that, that means that content needs to really transcend any repository, it needs to transcend any specific presentation. And so to make sure that we can do that, we store all of our content in the repository as XML, so that it's very easy to flow that content in and out of the repository, integrate with other systems, and really liberate that content. You also want to have an open architecture and use open standards, right? Because that means that you're going to be much more pluggable. So we're constantly looking for opportunities to leverage these open standards, like CMS, for example. You want to keep your deployment options open, so you don't necessarily want to be stuck on-premise or in the cloud and so on. So with Crafter CMS, we have deployment options for on-premise. You can host in the cloud. And we can even work with Alfresco 1, which is the ability to sync content from the cloud and on-premise, right? So if you have a group of authors who you don't necessarily want to bring inside your firewall, you can have them author content in the cloud, flow that content into your on-premise solution and out to the web. I think that use case is particularly relevant to a publishing organization like a newspaper who has stringers or external writers. And this is sort of the hybrid solution here. And I think this architecture here is it's unique to have all of these different use cases in one content management solution. It's absolutely unique and incredible to have this cloud hybrid capability. There's nobody else out there that can say that. Not even Adobe with the Creative Cloud can say that they can really leverage a SaaS offering and sync that on-premise, and it can be any kind of content. So this is a truly unique and very powerful architecture. And finally, open source. So again, in the keynote this morning, you kind of got to see the power of what open source can do. And I think the community that Alfresco's been able to build, the community that Drupal's been able to build, is a sort of testament to the effectiveness of open source. At Crafter CMS or Crafter Software, we truly believe that there's no better way to build software and enable developers than to open up the code. And so with that, I'd like to just show you a quick demo. Okay. So what we'll do here is I'm just gonna, okay. So you can see here, this is Crafter Studio, all right? And I'm just gonna log in here as an author. I'm just gonna narrate this for you. And you can see the Crafter Studio is a plugin to Alfresco Share, all right? And you can manage as many websites as you want, and you can create new websites based on a template. So you can see your corporate or a retail site, template, for example. So if you have many sites and you want to keep a consistent look and feel, you can create a template for that. There's an existing site here, so I'm going to click on that. That's called Rosie's Rivets. It's a retail site. And when we do, you can see you get a dashboard here. So this authoring experience no longer looks like Share. It's still inside of Share, but we've sort of moved away all of the Share stuff, and we're really focusing the experience on web experience management. You can see sort of as I'm interacting with the content there, you've got dynamic workflow options showing up. You can see here your information architecture, so it's very easy for authors to kind of get around their content, to understand what workflow options are available to them, and so on. Here, this is a little bit blurry, I think, but you can see jeans and jackets. So this is a retail store, and you can see that the UI has been customized specifically for this particular experience. So that kind of goes to what I was talking about before, the need to be able to customize the platform. Now we've clicked on a page and we're actually in what we call in-context preview here, and this is really the ability to see the entire site, to actually exercise the functionality, but inside of a safe sandbox. So any changes that we make here, they're not live. And we can actually exercise dynamic functionality. So this is just an example catalog page here, but we're doing some faceted navigation, some basically filtered search, and that's all driven by Apache Solr. Right, so all of our dynamic capability is Apache Solr in the back end. Now we're going back out here to the home page, and now that we have a little bit of a context here with our authoring tools and so on, I'll just show you some other things. So here's multi-channel preview. You can see the same page in a mobile device. You can see we can flip the phone on its side and check that out. Now let's take a look at some targeting here. So we turn on the pencil here, and what I want to show you is that this region here, this set of tiles, is actually a component. Okay, and so you can see here it's a home page scenario, it's a default scenario, and as I'm scrolling down, there's a bunch of collateral that we saw on the page. As I get towards the bottom, there's a bunch of targeting criteria here. So there's gender and season, and this one's selected for both genders and all seasons, so it makes it the default content. Now, if I want to see how the site is going to respond for other types of users, perhaps maybe a young shopper, a female shopper in the Northeast, I can sort of browse through this collection of personas. There's a catalog of personas here, and see which customer segments I have. When I find one that I like, I can assume it, and the site will automatically show me the experience that it's going to serve to that audience. And now I can go in there and edit that, and I can see that, okay, this one's targeted to the fall season and the female customer. So this should cancel here. Okay. All right. We also have the ability to switch back. Okay, so here it's just showing testing of this. So now I switch to that, and I'm switching back so I can really test that. And now what we're going to do is do some. Oh, I'm sorry. So now look here. I'm actually testing that in the mobile device, that experience, that targeting also works. So it's very easy for me to test across different channels very quickly. Okay, and then we'll go to multivariant testing. So let's say we want to know if this red button is more effective than a blue button. So here you see different experiments we're running, homepage buttons and sorts and so on. So now you can see we choose blue buttons. We're actually able to see that experience and see if it works with the collateral. And then we can choose the iPhone, and now we see channel, targeting rules, and experiment. All that, it's very quick for us to test this, right? So as more and more channels come online, we need to make sure that testing all these combinations and creating all these combinations is very quick and easy, and I think you get a sense of that here in this quick little demo. Now I'll browse over to the About page and do some editing, so you can see that there's pencils. We're going to turn on the pencil here. Okay, so we turn on the pencil. We get some, small pencils around the screen that represent each region we can edit. Click on that region, and now we can edit the content for that. And you can see that you're really editing in your styles. So here you've got a block quote at the bottom, and I'm going to insert an image here. In this case, upload an image from a desktop. But you can really integrate with any data source that you have. All the controls that we have a concept of data source, which means if you have an existing digital asset management system, it's very easy to integrate with that. Or if you want to use Alfresco, we can do that. Now we're just going to resize the image. The great thing about Alfresco is that in the back end, Alfresco can take all these images and make low-res images for mobile devices. So the platform absolutely helps with multi-channel. Now we're going to format up the image a little bit, add some padding around it.
And what are you working on? Is that?
Right here. We're working on this image, and we're sort of just formatting it right here. Okay? And so just adding a description to the image now.
But it's a document in
This is
HTML? Or is it?
It looks like to the user we're editing a page, and in the back end it's actually it's an XML. The content is stored in XML. So now we're modifying this block quote, and you're editing in your styles. Okay, so it's important for non-technical authors not to necessarily have to save just to see what they're doing, but to really, put their hands on the canvas and work right in the medium. Okay, and then once we're done with that, we'll save and close. And then all the other authors on the platform can see that. So just save there, and now you can see the changes that we made on the page. And then from there, if we wanted to, we could deploy it. Okay, now we're going to go over to the women's page here, and I'm going to turn off these pencils and show you a different kind of editing. I talked a little bit about this, but this is sort of called page components, or drag and drop page construction. So sometimes you want to give the authors more flexibility and say, here's a layout that we have, and you decide what components go in. So the first thing I'll do is drag in this nearest store component and just save that. There were no properties for that. Now you see Boston, MA, because I'm that woman from the Northeast there. And because I added a new component, I want to test it. It says it's the nearest store, so let me see if that's really true. So I have another user here that's in the southern US, and so we'll just assume that persona. And now you can see it's giving me content for Fort Lauderdale. So I can actually quickly go through and test some different scenarios, and you can see we can do some really cool geospatial targeting as well. Okay, so now we'll just assume back and leave it in Boston there. Okay, now let's do a little bit more page editing. So we'll go back into the publishing page components here, and maybe move a component around. So just pick it up and drag it, and then we'll add another component here, a map, and this one will require some properties. So we'll fill that out. Okay. So, sorry, I'm a fast typer even when my hands aren't on the keyboard. Okay. Right here in Alston, huh? Okay, so now we got a map. So it's really easy for non-technical people to build these different experiences. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about navigation. And navigation is sort of important, and you see that the About page there is in the bottom position. Let's say we don't want the About page in the navigation at all. We can just say place in nav, no, and then we can do a save and preview here, and now that page is out of the navigation. Okay, what if we want to move it in the navigation and we want to change its title? We can simply say, yes, place this page in the navigation. It's not a floating page, it's not a promotional page, it should be out in front. So we can put it in the first position, then we can change its label. So you can see authors have complete control over what's in the nav, what's not, what the labels are, and so on, and there's no technical skills required to make those changes. Okay, now let's, I think here I'm just going to switch to the anonymous user gratuitously. And then what I want to do is edit this image here. And we talked about being able to use native tools. So here we're going to use GIMP instead of Photoshop, and so I've loaded this image from the repository into GIMP, and I'm going to change the color for it. So I want to take it from that steely color to this copper color. And traditionally this is done by a designer, somebody who works offline, and they get everything ready and they test it on their desktop, and then they give it to some web guy who will then integrate it with the CMS. What we want to do is remove all of that stuff and make it really easy for them to work right in the platform, and for everybody collaboratively to see their results right in real time. And all of that's versioned, so you can see how easy that is.
Did it overwrite that image, or did it create a new one?
Yeah, it did. It overwrote it, but it created a version. So here you can see Now we've got some built-in analytics, so again, remember the emphasis on being able to measure your effectiveness. And it's not just necessarily standard web stats, which is what you see here, but also you can really measure different things for engagement. You also have on-page stats, so you can see how a page is performing. In this case, this page isn't performing very well. So we might be curious why that is. So I don't think you can see the URL here, or you can. So URLs are very friendly. Authors have complete control over what the URLs look like. But it turns out that we have no meta tags. So let's go ahead and add those. So I just want you to see how easy it is to update a content model, update templates, and be ready to publish. So what we'll do is we'll go into the form as an author, and we're looking for where can we put these SEO meta tags? And it's just nowhere here in this form. Okay, so that's the first sign of a problem. We don't have the fields we want. And then we say, okay, well, let's go add them. Well, we don't have access to the administration console, so we're just an author. So what we'll do is we'll call in maybe the web ninja on the team, somebody who's got a little bit more access, in this case somebody who's called the admin user. So we'll log in. Here you can see that user has a lot more websites in there. So again, they're managing more websites. Their dashboard is completely different. They can see how content's flowing through the whole system. But to our point here, they have access to the admin console. So managing content types in Crafter CMS is super easy. Anybody who understands a little bit about describing objects can do this. It's all just drag and drop. So if I want to add a new section for SEO, I can just sort of browse through my collection of capabilities here and drag out a new section and drop it. Maybe I'll put that above the content area section, and we'll call that page SEO. Okay, maybe we'll default that open. And now we need to start adding some controls to it. So you're not adding strings or integers here, you're adding form fields, which I think is just much more easy for non-technical people to understand. In this case, we're going to add a field called keywords. It's a text area. And the variable, which is going to show up in our XML documents and also in our free marker templates, is going to be called demo page keywords. And then we'll do the same thing for description. So if we move down here, actually, you can see here we're just going to make that field required. And now we'll add another field for description. So just pick it up, drag it out. Okay. And also give that a name and a variable and set its constraints.
How does it know that to add meta description to the page based on just what you did there?
Well, it doesn't. Right now we're just changing the model, right? So nothing about the page has changed yet. Okay, so we'll make this required. And now we save this. As soon as we save this, any page based on this page type is immediately going to start requiring these fields. As we can see here, we're going to hit refresh. Right here's a content area. We actually added a section above this. And now it says, hey, give me these two fields. So it's very easy to update a content model. So now we'll put our values in. I'm not going to make us sit and wait for me to type that. It's apparently on the super typer. There we go. Okay. And then we'll save it. Okay. And still, nothing has changed in the presentation. Okay. Now we've just captured some new content in this model. And what we're going to do is go into in-context editing and click Page Templates. So there's a very clean separation of presentation and content. Presentation is in these free marker templates, right? And you can see here, free marker is, for those who aren't familiar, it's a Turing complete templating language. You can do things like includes, you can create macros, and we have some out-of-the-box libraries for dynamic navigation and social integration. Here you can see how we're inserting some dynamic content. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to insert these two dynamic fields so that every page that's using this template will now show these new fields. So we'll call this meta tag keywords, and we'll now make the content area of that meta tag dynamic. So we'll say $model dot, and then our variable name that we put into that model. Okay, and then save it. And again, just sort of speed things along just a little bit. Yeah. We'll go from here. So I just did the same thing twice, and then say update, and now we can just refresh the page and view the source, and now we see these new tags and our updated content. And so And then from there, we can publish this. So it's that easy. Now, in a lot of other systems, that kind of request would take, hours or days, or depending on who's doing the deployment. If it's IT, it might take a week. So, yeah. Yeah, so actually the demo is done, so I'd be happy to take some questions. Yeah.
So you changed the template, but only added those keywords and descriptions to this single instance of the page. What happens to all of the other pages that we're using now?
Right, so the question is, there's a lot of pages that use the same model, but we haven't updated their content. So, what I did there in the template was a little bit naive, right? And what I could do is, in the template, is I could actually say bang and then give that a default value and say, don't do anything. There's all kinds of you should code your templates a little bit defensively. Then if you absolutely need content changed, you can run an action in Alfresco and update all the documents as well with a default value. So there's a bunch of different strategies depending on what your rules are. Mostly the answer is just to code the template defensively to handle the scenario where that content isn't there. Okay, next question?
Couple questions.
Sure.
If you are a hosting or a site reseller and you have multiple sites completely separate, how's the licensing work out there? Is that per one crafter logic per Alfresco?
It's per CPU, just like Alfresco's.
Okay.
4-core CPU, and you can host as many websites on that as you want. I mean, basically, if you can get 50 sites on a single CPU, good for you. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then any tie-ins to e-commerce solutions?
We have an API we call Crafter Commerce, and that has a plugin to eBusiness Suite, Oracle eBusiness Suite. And the idea there is that we want to make sure that we have a sort of standard kind of API for carts and checkouts and things like that, that we can build a nice funnel for people, so that marketing people can continue to manage the content around the funnel through the checkout, but that you can then hook into any e-commerce system that you want, whether that's ATG or Oracle eBusiness Suite or whatever. So that API exists, and you can sort of link up to whatever you want. We do have some Oracle eBusiness Suite integration. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to note some advantages of using Crafter front end as opposed to using a Drupal front end.
Sure. So this would be on the delivery side. So I think there's again, a lot of this depends on where you're coming from, but one of the big advantages is just the architecture. So Crafter CMS is a decoupled architecture, which means the delivery system is completely separate and that there's no database under it. So databases are a little bit challenging to scale. I think in the keynote they kind of hinted at that. This has no database. It's completely horizontally scalable, and it's independent. So that's a huge advantage, I think, there, or difference. And another thing is it's Java-based, and there's no other language that has more integration capability than Java. So there's more libraries out there to integrate with Java. I think that's another big difference. So again, I think there's technology differences and architecture differences are the biggest distinctions. Sure.
Do any of your partners use Crafter for a purely responsive site?
Yeah, we have. I think Hightail had, and I'm not sure if their site is responsive today. They just did an update to it, but the first iteration of it was just responsive. It just used Zerb to do the responsive design, so they didn't do separate templates. And it's completely up to you. Do you want to use templates in an adaptive approach, or do you want to use JavaScript and CSS in a responsive, or do you want to use them together? But so it's completely up to you, and you can use whatever framework you want, whether that's Twitter Bootstrap or Zerb or whatever. Nothing else? Well, then I'd just like to say thanks for coming out. Thank you.